But I think the most important thing is to understand all of the different aspects of the industry, from the finance side to the infrastructure side. Read all the news. There is so much news now out there within our industry, with the financial news on the industry. Read who's moving into the industry on the finance and investment side. Read who all the major players are, understand who the big data center operators are, understand who's backing them, understand who's running them. Learn as much as you can about every aspect of the industry, really. And hi, it's Jonathan Evans from Total Data Center Solutions, and you're watching the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
Hey, it's Joshua Feinberg from the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, and I'm thrilled to have with me a very special guest today. I'm welcoming Jonathan Evans from Total Data Center Solutions, based in the UK, does a lot of work in the Nordics as well. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joshua. It's good to be here.
Thrilled to have you here as well. For those of you that aren't familiar with your background, can you give us a little bit of the story of how you originally came to found Total Data Center Solutions, how you got involved in the data center industry as a whole?
Yeah, sure.
Kind of the origin story of how you got into this line of work.
Yes, it's a long and sordid tale, I'm afraid. I left college and I wanted to be a boat designer, and I designed boats for about 2 or 3 years and couldn't make a living from it. And I went along to an employment agency one day and I showed them all my boat drawings, and they said, well, if you can draw boats, you can draw computer rooms. And they sent me along to a company who built computer rooms. And I ended up in the computer room, or now data center industry. And I've been there ever since, which is quite a long time. And so it was just sheer coincidence, but it's always been a thriving industry, and it's always looked after me. And it's just got more and more exciting and more money flowing into the industry, fortunately. So it's been a good career move for me, even though it was an accidental one. Total Data Center Solutions started in 2002. And when I started helping new colocation companies establish themselves in the market, first I was helping people technically, and then I was helping them with other aspects of getting into the data center industry, around marketing and around sales, and around finance. Just property developers and people like that who wanted to get into the industry, and so they might have a piece of land or something, and they'd say, can you help us develop a co-location business? And I've been doing that ever since. I did it first of all in Ireland, then in London, then in Luxembourg, then in Norway, then in Sweden, and now back in Sweden again with a new company called T-Loop, who've been founded about 6 months, and a very exciting company it is as well. So that's where I am today, still working away, helping co-location companies get established.
So that's a fascinating story. Must be incredibly unique to find someone that got you into the data center industry because they saw potential in your interest in boat design and how it led to the design of computer rooms. Glad they saw that.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to draw a computer room or a data center than it is to draw a boat, I can assure you. Drawing a boat is quite a complex thing, 3-dimensional and all curves, and drawing a data center is just all boxes. It's not quite as interesting, but a lot less challenging.
So I imagine at your stage of your career that when you would attend events and different groups you're involved in, you probably get approached quite often for mentorship. Given that, what advice would you give to someone that's just getting started in a client-facing role within the data center industry, specifically in a sales or marketing or customer success or product type of role?
I think the most important thing is to understand the fundamentals of the data center. You have to understand the infrastructure and how the whole thing hangs together. You have to understand about uptime certification. You have to understand about failure rates, all the different components that go into the data center, the UPS, the generators, the air conditioning, and fire protection. You have to understand all of that very, very well. So I'd spend a lot of time reading about data center infrastructure to begin with, so you've got the fundamentals in place so you can have a decent conversation with someone when you start talking to people people about data centers, whether you're in a sales role or in a project management role. So yeah, that's the most important thing. Get the fundamentals right in your head before you move on to the next step.
In terms of just a good, well-rounded background in all the different facets of technology and facilities and construction.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. And I should add the finance aspect of it as well, I suppose, how much it costs to put the data center together in the first place. So people understand the finances of it.
And that's changed over time as well, right? Especially with what's going to happen next step with AI.
It surely,
high performance.
It surely has.
Jonathan, what about someone that's at the other end of their career, maybe mid-career, someone that you've known for a decade or more? They've been working either in colocation providers or with technology companies or on the facility side, and they come to you and say, I've just hit a wall with my career. I don't feel like it's progressing anywhere. What should I do next? What advice would you give to someone in that role who wants to stay within the data center industry, that's trying to find their way for their next chapter?
Yeah, well, I suppose it depends which role they're in, really. But I think the most important thing is to understand all of the different aspects of the industry. From the finance side to the infrastructure side. Read all the news. There is so much news now out there within our industry, with the financial news on the industry. Read who's moving into the industry on the finance and investment side. Read who all the major players are, understand who the big data center operators are, understand who's backing them, understand who's running them. Learn as much as you can about every aspect of the industry, really. And obviously there are a lot of personalities in the industry. Try and get to know some of them. And the other thing is, build up your LinkedIn profile so that everybody knows you exist. So that if you're going to move on to another stage in your career, people already know who you are before you even walk through the front door. So I'd say build up your own personal profile as much as you can on LinkedIn and other social media. Maybe that would be the most important thing to do, really. So people are aware of your capabilities and might even approach you as a potential employer to come on board with them. So yeah, I'd say probably social profile, as well as understanding every aspect of the finance side and the personality side of all of the co-location operators and funders in the industry.
It's super interesting advice to pay attention to your personal brand, how you present yourself on LinkedIn, because we all have an employer brand that we represent, and then there's the individual brand, especially for someone that's in a client-facing role. People, when they tend to meet someone brand new, one of the first things they do is they go look them up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's fundamental these days, isn't it? That people have got to know who you are, and the better you can build your profile so people understand your personality, the better chance you've got when you go into a new environment or to work for a potential new employer.
I know, Jonathan, you're very passionate about best practices around heat reuse and sustainability, and I know you follow really closely the current events in the UK and beyond on concerns about grid availability and how well the grid's going to deal with increased power demands from data centers and EVs and other sources in the coming years. What do you feel the industry is doing right, and where could they use a little bit of course correction to be better prepared for issues around sustainability?
Well, I was very fortunate. I went to work in Norway in 2011 for Green Mountain when they were just starting a data center in the side of a fjord. And they were one of the leaders in the sustainable data centers when most people didn't even know or care about sustainability, surprisingly now. So Green Mountain ran off hydroelectric power. It used the fjord outside the data center to cool the data center. It used hypoxic ventilation to provide the fire protection. And it used an existing structure rather than building a new structure. So it was right at the forefront of sustainability. And obviously it was at the forefront of green energy, because all of the energy supplied to it was from hydroelectric. But of course, in those days, no one was interested in sustainability. And it was quite a tough job getting people to understand how important it was at the time. Getting Norway as it understood as a data center destination was difficult because the connectivity wasn't great. And so it took a while to even get good connectivity into Norway. And then following that, I went to work with a company called Eco Data Center in Sweden. And again, they were at the forefront of sustainability. They built their data center out of wood, which was, and I don't think there's been another one built out of wood since. But it's a great way to build a data center. There's a fantastic advantages to it. And if anybody wants to know more about it, please get in touch and I'll explain all the benefits of building a data center in wood instead of in concrete and steel. They also made one key correct decision in that they chose the right location for their data center. The data center that reuses heat has to be in a place where the heat can be reused. And they chose a place on the edge of a town called Finland in the middle of Sweden, which had a district heating system which they could plug into. And in the summer, they had a wood pellet manufacturing plant adjacent to them, which they could reuse the heat to dry the wood to make the wood pellets. So they really were at the front end of sustainability. Since then, I've been interested in immersion cooling for the last 3 or 4 years because I think it's a great way to go forward. We're also promoting battery storage in data centers to try and reduce the demand on the data center when power is at its most critical during 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock at night. So these are the things that we're doing to try and improve the sustainability aspect of the industry. I work with a company now in Stockholm called T-Loop, and they are reusing the heat from office blocks to in office blocks, reusing the data center heat to heat the office blocks by having small data centers in the basements. So yeah, I've always been passionate about sustainability. The issues now, of course, are around grid availability. Sweden is struggling to find any spare capacity, and some of it's been used up by the battery storage companies, taking it away from the data center companies. Norway is not too bad. We've still got quite a bit of grid capacity left in Norway, but the permitting is quite a slow process there. Helsinki and Finland are looking pretty good now in terms of spare capacity in the grid and the infrastructure. So I'd say of all of them at the moment, Finland is probably sitting there at the front end with Norway next and then Sweden behind. Luckily, my friends at T-Loop have found a way around that, and they've managed to find some data center capacity in and around Stockholm, which is by coming at it from a different angle. But yeah, I mean, infrastructure is a huge issue in the UK. There is not enough grid capacity in the UK. There's just very, very little spare capacity in the UK now. So they're going to have to start moving towards gas turbines and things like that to try and generate electricity on site. That must be the way forward for them, I guess.
I remember reading something maybe 6 months or a year ago about an indoor heated swimming pool as a heat exchange sustainability experiment somewhere in the UK. I don't know if am I remembering this right correctly?
It's a company called Deep Green, and the guy who runs it did a fantastic job of marketing it about 6 months ago, as you say. Basically, he's got a very small immersion cooling unit, which he's developed himself. And he's using that to heat swimming pools because local authorities can't afford to heat swimming pools anymore in the UK. So he's been promoting the idea of very small immersion cooling units with running AI, to heat the swimming pools. And yeah, it's a great idea. He's had a lot of funding for it now. So he's done a great job of promoting the concept. So yeah, fair play to him. He's done the right thing in terms of what, but he sees it as distributed IT instead of centralized IT. And that's the way he's promoting it. Instead of one big data center, you have lots of small edge units all over the place. Yeah. But you're right, he has done that, and he's done it very successfully.
Very interesting. The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com. So, Jonathan, given your background in developing new data centers and with a strong sales and marketing capacity with that as well, what do you see as the future of that kind of role going forward, given that the core audience for this podcast are people in and around the data center that work in sales, marketing, customer success, or product channel partnership kind of roles? How do you see that changing in the next 2, 3, 4 years?
I think there'll be more emphasis on online podcasts and more emphasis on LinkedIn, which is a phenomenal marketing tool, and less emphasis on conferences. I think the conferences are great fun and they're great to go along to network with your colleagues. But the question is how much, if you're a co-location data center operator, how much you benefit from going along to these conferences, because they don't seem to attract many end users or enterprise customers. So it's mostly the suppliers of the equipment who benefit because they sell on to the co-location companies. But for the co-location companies, finding clients who attend these conferences is very difficult. I could probably do as well working on LinkedIn for a morning, looking for new contacts, as I could going to an exhibition for 2 or 3 days and spending a significant amount of money at the exhibition, and especially if you exhibit there. So although it's good fun to do the networking and meet your colleagues and talk about the industry, I think that side of it is not as productive as the social media side, primarily the LinkedIn, to be honest. And that's what I've been working hard on the last few years is that side of it. First of all, raising the profile of the company on LinkedIn, and then having a really good website to back it up when people go there, and then have lots of monitoring of the website, who's visiting the website, etc., etc. Lots of Google ads, lots of LinkedIn ads, monitoring which are the most effective. All around that, really, those are the things which I think are going to predominantly dominate the industry going forward. A lot less interesting than going along to a few exhibitions and having a few beers with your colleagues, but I'm sad to say that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah, I think a lot of the groundwork for those changes may have been coming up prior to the pandemic, but I think 2 years of people working at home and getting really comfortable with video conferencing and having so many different aspects of our personal lives, getting super comfortable buying groceries online and making all kinds of arrangements online and many times preferring self-service over assisted. It's easy to see how we're going to end up going down that path with different changes and preferences. And whenever someone is deciding whether to go to a conference or exhibit at a conference, of course, they should look at the media kit of who attended last year and who they think is going to attend this year to make sure it lines up with their core customers. And interesting. I've done a lot of work with co-location data centers and the intersection with co-location and managed services, and a lot have really struggled with figuring out how different their playbook needs to be compared to enterprise vendors in technology facilities. A lot of these conferences, people look like they're having a great time and they're building lots of great contacts. How that leads to revenue and how that puts opportunities on their deals board, I don't know.
I think there's no doubt, that for suppliers of equipment, going along to Data Cloud in Cannes in a couple of weeks will be great because all of the co-location companies will be there. So for those guys, I advised some construction companies to attend Data Cloud a few years ago in Monaco, and they spent a lot of money on a stand, and they more or less established their business on the back of that exhibition, because they met all of the co-location operators, they met all of the hyperscalers, and it was great for them. But when it comes to being a co-location operator, going to the conference, looking for potential customers for your co-location, it's a lot more of a struggle. They don't seem to be able to attract those people to these conferences, and I've been telling them that for a long time.
Yeah, segmentation is a persistent issue in the technology industry going back decades. I remember doing work with Microsoft's channel partner program all the way back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. I wrote for a trade publication, and in many of those instances, the segmentation and the fragmentation really tripped them. And especially, there's just so many small companies, small businesses that they don't identify as small businesses. They identify by their business model or their industry specialization. So reaching them is especially challenging, and so many of the co-location providers are facing commoditization. So yeah, it's super interesting. With switching it up a little bit, forward looking on the technology side, has AI yet had much of an impact on what you do on a day-to-day basis?
I keep getting asked by LinkedIn whether I want to change my post using AI, and I haven't done that yet. To be honest, on a day-to-day basis, AI hasn't impacted me at all. Not that even apart from talking to my phone and asking it some directions and asking me to play me music, it hasn't affected me at all, really. I think AI, obviously, from an industry perspective, is massive in terms of the impact it's having. And we are all struggling now to find big sites with like 100 megawatts of power or 200 megawatts of power. And they all want it yesterday. And so from the AI is just impacting us in the industry more than it's on my personal life at the moment. So that's all I can say about it, really. It's not something which is affecting me at all that I'm aware of.
I know you mentioned that you're a huge fan of LinkedIn. Do you have any other favorite apps or software tools that are indispensable for running total data center solutions and working with other projects?
I think the only other thing I do is, the apps that when they come up on the conferences, those apps are critical for me to meet who's attending and try and arrange meetings with them. So I guess apart from those apps, there's not much else that affects me in my business life, really, that I can think of. It's just around the apps that come up with the conferences. I do Twitter, but I do it on a personal level. I try very hard not to do anything political on LinkedIn. So if there's anything political, I do it all on my LinkedIn, on my Twitter site, which where I can vent my frustrations at the politics of the world. So yeah, so really, it's just LinkedIn that I use for work, and nothing else really.
The final area I wanted to ask you about today is if you have any favorite podcasts or YouTube media that you listen to on a regular basis that you think would be an especially good fit for interviewing on this podcast next.
Yeah, I can suggest a few people who I think would make interesting interviewees. There's a guy called Lars Schneddin who started Eco Data Center. The people who started Green Mountain have now left, so I can't suggest any of those guys. There's a guy working for T-Loop who's very, very good at on that subject of heat reuse. And Cecilia, the marketing lady there, would be very good as well. So there's a few people like that I could certainly suggest to you as being at the forefront of our industry.
And that's awesome. And that comes full circle to what you were talking about earlier with recommending that people invest a lot of time and effort building out their personal brand and sharing helpful content and insights on their LinkedIn profile to help educate and build trust and all those big research projects that people do before they're ready for one-on-one conversations. So yeah, I've noticed just in the past 10 years that I wouldn't call it an explosion of podcasts, but I would say compared to over the last 10 years when there was maybe a handful, there's now solidly at least a few dozen. So I guess that's pretty significant.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can find, you're going to learn, going back to the initial conversations that we had, the other initial questions I answered. There is so much information now on YouTube in terms of data center design. There's reams and reams of videos now you can watch to really get a great insight into what Google's data center looks like, what Facebook's data center looks like, listening to the people who design them, listening to the people who operate them. There's just a vast amount of information available out there now for people who want to research the subject in depth.
I think that's another big takeaway I'm getting from today's interview is the concept of being a lifelong learner, taking responsibility for your professional development and constantly keeping up with what's going on big picture, not just within your own company, but what's going on industry-wide and what affects the clients that you work with on a regular basis. So you can
I've always tried to stay one step ahead, So I was talking about immersion cooling 5 years ago, and I was talking about battery storage 5 years ago, and I was talking about sustainable data centers 12 years ago. So yeah, it's just one of those things. You just try and look at what's going on in the industry and try and think about where we're going to be in another 5 years' time, and get there before anybody else.
That's terrific. Jonathan, this has been super insightful today. Really appreciate you sharing all your advice that you've gained over your career and helping to pass it to the next generation. What's the best way for someone to follow what you're working on or get in touch with you if they have any questions? Is LinkedIn your preferred channel?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just look me up on LinkedIn and connect with me, and then we can message each other. And that's definitely the way forward. Obviously, you can go onto my website, totaldatacentersolutions.co.uk, and you can communicate through that, and you can have a better insight into the range of services we offer, including now we're offering land for sale in the Nordics with power availability, because we've been able to find land where no one else has been able to with power, and so we've been taking that to the market as well with a colleague of mine, Eileen, who is actually from São Paulo, but she's working in the Nordics as well with me, and she's also looking for land in Brazil with power. So we're sort of spreading our wings really in terms of the things that we have available through our website.
Yeah, the website, real estate is super fascinating. I just read something a couple of days ago where the chair of JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, was at a conference talking about how the digital infrastructure data centers are the bright spot of commercial real estate, kind of offsetting some of the frustrations around commercial real estate with the work from home over the last few years. So yeah,
I mean, it's had a huge impact, isn't it? When you think about it, no one wants to go to shopping centers or office blocks anymore. The only thing you can buy now or invest in is warehousing and real estate and data centers. Yeah, I think he's right. It's had a huge impact in the city of London, for example. Docklands offices are being vacated all the time. It's going to become a massive issue. So data centers are the bright spark.
As Jensen Huang from NVIDIA call it, the AI factories.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's probably what you could call them. But these people know that the cloud isn't in the cloud now. I think they're beginning to understand that it's actually a big black box somewhere.
There's still going to be an endless supply of friends and family over the years who will still have a puzzled look when you ask them, so where do you think Facebook comes from? Where does Alexa live? You get a blank stare. So there'll still be a need to explain that.
I know, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But yeah, we're getting somewhere with educating people, but still a long way to go, especially in terms of employing young people as well. It's a big issue for us.
That's the starting point for people in this space, is to view themselves as educators.
Yes.
You can have a really transformative impact.
Yeah.
It's terrific. So I've been speaking with Jonathan Evans, who's the founder director of total data center solutions based in London. Jonathan works all over Europe, especially in the Nordics. I'm thrilled to have you today join me on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, and I wish you all the best. Look forward to hearing great things coming from your work.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Take care now.
Cheers then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.